Imagine this. You're 8 months pregnant, bleeding, in agony, alone in your penthouse. You call your husband, the man who swore he'd protect you, and he says, "You're overreacting." Then he hangs up. That was Grace Holloway's reality. While she was dying on the bathroom floor, he was drinking champagne with investors. But fate had other plans, because the man who saved her life was her husband's billionaire enemy. What happens when betrayal turns into rebirth? When the man who left becomes a ghost, and the man who hated her husband becomes the father her children deserved. This is a story of heartbreak, revenge, and redemption. And trust me, the ending will leave you breathless. If you love stories that make your heart race and your soul cheer, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because this one, you won't want it to miss a second of it. The phone rang for the fourth time that evening. Grace Holloway stared at the screen, watching her husband's photo smile back at her. The wedding picture from Nantucket, 4 years ago, when Derek still answered her calls. She pressed the green button with shaking hands. "Derek, please. Something's wrong. The twins. I can't feel them moving. The pain, it's getting worse and I'm bleeding and I need you to come home right now." Her voice cracked on the last word. In the background, she could hear the sounds of his investor party, champagne glasses clinking, laughter, music, the buzz of successful people doing successful things. "Grace," Derek's voice carried that edge, the one that made her feel small. "I'm in the middle of the investor presentation. This is the Singapore deal. You know how important this is. Take an aspirin, call your doctor. I'll be home by 9. "Derek, I'm scared. Something's really wrong this time. You said that last month with the false labor, and the month before when you thought you had preeclampsia. The doctor said you were fine. You're just anxious. It's the pregnancy hormones making you paranoid." Grace looked down at her white maternity dress, the dark red stains spreading across the fabric like spilled wine. Too much blood. Way too much. "This is different. Please, I'm begging you." A long sigh, the kind that said she was being difficult, dramatic, too much. "I'll try to leave early. Just breathe. You're overreacting." Again, the line went dead. Grace stood alone in their downtown Seattle penthouse, rain streaking down the floor-to-ceiling windows. 32 weeks pregnant with twins, bleeding, cramping, terrified, and completely alone. She checked her phone again. Lock screen, unlock, his photo smiling. Lock, unlock, lock. A habit she'd developed over the past few months, looking for signs of life from a man who lived in the same house but felt 1,000 miles away. The clock on the wall ticked, 7:43 in the evening. Derek had promised to be home by 6, then 7, then 8. Now 9. She'd stopped believing his promises somewhere around month 5 of her pregnancy. Another wave of pain hit, sharp, like knives twisting in her abdomen. Grace doubled over, gripping the marble kitchen counter. Her Harvard sweatshirt, Derek's old one that she'd stolen years ago, was soaked with sweat. The babies. She had to feel the babies move. Grace pressed her hands to her belly, waiting, praying, nothing. Just silence where there should have been kicks and rolls and the constant gymnastics of two tiny humans fighting for space. Her internal voice, the one she'd been ignoring for months, finally spoke up clearly. "Call 911. Stop waiting for him. He's not coming. He never comes. Call 911 right now." Grace grabbed her phone with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency?" "I'm pregnant, 32 weeks, twins. Something's wrong, the pain, I can't, there's so much blood." "Ma'am, what's your address?" Grace gave it, the penthouse address in the fancy building downtown, the one that always made people pause, impressed by the wealth, the success, the perfect life she was supposed to be living. Right now, none of it mattered. Not the marble countertops or the designer furniture or the view of Elliott Bay. "Are you bleeding?" Grace looked down again, the puddle at her feet, dark red on white marble. "Yes, oh God, yes." "Paramedics are on the way. Stay on the line with me. Is anyone with you?" "No, I'm alone." "Can you call someone? A family member? Your husband?" Grace laughed. It came out broken, wrong, the sound of something cracking. "I've been calling my husband all day. He's too busy." The operator's voice softened. Just a little, no. Enough for Grace to know that the woman understood, that she'd heard this story before. Pregnant woman, absent husband, tale as old as time. Okay, honey, the ambulance is 3 minutes away. I need you to try to sit down. Can you do that for me? Grace tried. Her legs gave out halfway. She fell to her knees on the cold marble floor. The phone clattered away from her. She could hear the operator's voice, tiny and distant. Ma'am, are you there? I need you to answer me. Grace tried to respond. Her mouth wouldn't form words. The room was spinning, tilting, graying at the edges. Her hands found her belly, both palms pressed flat. Please, please be okay, please. One kick, weak, flutter soft, like a butterfly trapped behind glass. Then nothing, silence. The last thing Grace thought before the darkness pulled her under was that she'd made so many mistakes. She'd stayed too long, forgiven too much. Convinced herself that busy meant Derek still cared. But busy was just another word for choosing something else. Choosing someone else. Choosing anything but her. The siren sounds filtered through her consciousness, growing louder, closer. Help was coming. Too late to save her marriage. But maybe, just maybe, not too late to save her babies. The paramedics found Grace unconscious on the marble floor, a pool of blood spreading beneath her. Patient unresponsive, female, approximately 30 years old, 32 weeks pregnant with twins, visible hemorrhaging, possible placental abruption. Sarah Mitchell, the younger paramedic, knelt beside Grace while he and her partner, Linda, checked vitals. Sarah had seen a lot in her 5 years on the job: car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses. But pregnant women alone and bleeding, they'd always hit different. Blood pressure 80/50, heart rate 130. She's in shock. They move fast. IV line, oxygen mask, stabilizing her neck, getting her onto the gurney. Sarah noticed details: the expensive penthouse, the wedding photos on the wall, a handsome man in a suit, a beautiful bride in lace, both of them young and hopeful and in love. And now the bride was dying alone. In the ambulance, Grace's eyes fluttered open, confused, scared. My babies, she whispered. Are my babies okay? Sarah took her hand, squeezed. We're getting you to the hospital. You're going to be okay. What's your name? Grace. Grace Holloway. Okay, Grace, how far along are you? 32 weeks, twins, a boy and a girl. Are they alive? Please tell me they're alive. Sarah checked the fetal monitors. 2 heartbeats. Fast, but there. Fighting. They're hanging in there. You're all fighters. Is there someone we can call? Your husband? Family? Grace's face crumpled. My husband, Derek. Derek Holloway. His number's in my phone. Linda found the phone, dialed, put it on speaker. It rang 4 times. Derek's voice came through, irritated and slightly drunk. I told you I'd call you back. Sarah spoke up, her voice professional but cold. Mr. Holloway, this is City Memorial Paramedic Team. Your wife is being transported with potential placental abruption. Twin pregnancy, 32 weeks. This is life-threatening. We need you at Mercy General immediately. A long pause. Background noise filtered through. Music, laughter, champagne glasses clinking. I'm sorry, this is really bad timing. How serious is this exactly? Sarah's jaw clenched. Grace saw it. So did Linda. Sir, your wife is hemorrhaging. The twins are in distress. She could die. This is as serious as it gets. We need you at the hospital now. Right, okay. I'll try to get there as soon as I can. Try. That word hung in the air like poison. Sir, this is not a try situation. This is a now situation. Your wife needs you. I understand. I'll be there. He hung up. Not, is she okay? Not, tell her I love her. Not, I'm leaving right now. Just a dismissive, I'll be there, followed by a click. Sarah looked at Grace. Their eyes met, woman to woman. No words needed. That look hurt worse than the contractions, because it was recognition. Someone else had seen it. Witnessed it, which meant Grace wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining things, wasn't being dramatic like Derek always said. It really happened. Her husband really had just been told his wife might die, and he'd said he'd try to make it. Try. The ambulance ride blurred. Lights flashing red and white outside the windows. The siren drowning out everything except Grace's thoughts. Memories flooded her mind, morphine sharp and devastating. Derek missing her first ultrasound. The merger meeting got moved up. You understand, right? It's just one appointment. She'd understood. She always understood. Derek missing the gender reveal party in Tokyo for a conference. She'd cut the cake alone. Pink and blue layers, twins, a boy and a girl. She'd cried while her mother held her and said, "He's working hard for his family." Was he? Their fourth anniversary, 3 months ago. He'd canceled their reservation at the restaurant where he'd proposed. Client dinner. Couldn't be helped. She'd eaten Chinese takeout alone in their bedroom, looking at their wedding album, wondering when he'd stop looking at her like she mattered. Last week, Thursday night, she'd asked him straight out, "Do you still love me?" Derek hadn't even looked up from his laptop. Of course, don't be dramatic. Not yes, not more than anything. Not what kind of question is that? Just don't be dramatic. Like her feelings were an inconvenience, a problem to be managed, a glitch in his otherwise perfect system. "Grace, stay with us." Sarah's voice pulled her back. "We're almost there. 2 more minutes. Keep breathing." Grace focused on breathing, in, out, in, out. Her hands rested on her belly, flat palms against stretched skin. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't leave sooner. I'm sorry I let him make me feel crazy. I'm sorry you have a father who doesn't show up." One of the babies kicked, weak but there, a fighter, just like their mother was about to become. The ambulance doors flew open. Mercy General, emergency bay, bright lights and rushing people and organized chaos. A woman in surgical scrubs ran forward, dark hair pulled back, commanding presence. Name badge, Dr. Caroline Cross, OBGYN. "I'm Dr. Cross. Grace, can you hear me?" Grace nodded. "We're taking you straight to emergency C-section. The twins are in distress. We need to get them out now. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Is your husband here?" Grace's voice broke. "No. Is he coming?" "He said he'd try." Cross's jaw tightened. Her eyes flashed with something dark. Fury barely contained. "Who can we call? Parents? Friends? Anyone?" Grace's mind went blank. Her mother was in Florida visiting Grace's sister. Her best friend, Marissa, was working a double shift across town at the other hospital. No one, there's no one. Dr. Cross's expression changed, softened for just a second, then hardened into determination. "Then you've got me. I won't leave you. I promise." They wheeled Grace toward the operating room. The ceiling tiles passed overhead. Grace counted them, something to focus on besides the fear. 37 tiles, then the surgical suite doors. As the anesthesia mask came down, Grace had one final coherent thought. She'd stayed in her marriage too long, forgiven too much, made herself smaller and smaller, thinking if she just needed less, Derek would give her something. But you can't shrink yourself into being loved. She knew that now. Too late. But she knew it. The world went dark. Nathan Cross sat in the surgical waiting room, hands clasped, jaw tight, wondering what the hell he was doing there. 20 minutes ago, he'd been at the Children's Hospital Gala. $1,000 a plate dinner, tuxedo and bow tie, schmoozing donors, giving speeches about the importance of showing up for kids in need. Then his phone had buzzed. Caroline, his sister. "Nathan, I need you at Mercy General, now." No explanation, just urgency in her voice. The kind that meant don't ask questions, just move. So he'd moved, left the gala mid-speech, jumped in his car, drove through Seattle traffic like the devil was chasing him, and now he sat alone in a sterile waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee, waiting to find out why. The TV in the corner played news on mute, some political scandal, the world turning like nothing was wrong. Nathan wasn't thinking about the news. He was thinking about Derek Holloway. Everyone in the biotech and pharmaceutical world knew Derek Holloway, knew him and either admired him or hated him. Nathan fell firmly in the hate category. 2 years ago, Derek's company Holloway Pharmaceuticals had sued Nathan's company Crosstech Biomedical for patent infringement. They'd claimed Nathan's breakthrough cancer treatment was based on their research. It was a lie, a calculated, malicious lie designed to steal 5 years of Nathan's work, 6 months in court, $2 million in legal fees. Nathan had won. The judge had called Holloway Pharma's case frivolous and without merit. Derek had smiled on the courthouse steps, actually smiled, told reporters, sometimes you take a shot. This one didn't land, no hard feelings. But Nathan had plenty of hard feelings. 6 months ago, at an industry gala, Derek had cornered Nathan at the bar, 3 drinks deep and mean with bad. Enjoying your victory cross? If you mean the lawsuit where you tried to steal my research, then yes. Derek had leaned in close, breath reeking of whiskey. Careful, pride comes before a fall. I've been talking to some investors, mentioning concerns about your testing protocols, ethical concerns. Nothing concrete, just concerns. 3 weeks later, Nathan's company had been investigated. Anonymous tip about unethical testing. They'd been cleared completely, but the damage was done. Stock dropped 15%. 2 major investors pulled out. Derek Holloway had done that. And Nathan had spent the last 6 months fantasizing about various forms of revenge. None of them legal. All of them satisfying. So when Caroline had called and mentioned Derek's name, Nathan's first instinct had been to tell her to count him out. Whatever Derek Holloway needed, he could go to hell. But then Caroline had said 5 words that changed everything. His wife is dying alone. Now Nathan sat in the waiting room, hands still clasped, thinking about his mother. 20 years ago, cancer, stage 4 by the time they found it. His father had visited her twice in 8 months, too busy with business, too important to sit with his dying wife. She died alone in a Boston hospital room at 2 in the morning. The nurse had found her, called the family at 6. Nathan's father had been in Singapore, at a conference. He'd gotten home 18 hours later. Nathan had been 14, away at boarding school. He'd sworn that day that he'd never become his father. Never be too busy for the people who mattered. Never let someone die alone because he had better places to be. And yet here he was, 40 years old, working 80-hour weeks. No relationships lasting longer than 3 months. Throwing money at problems instead of showing up. He'd become his father, after all. The doors swung open. Carolyn appeared, still in surgical scrubs, hair damp with sweat, blood on her sleeve, exhaustion carved into her face. Nathan stood. "Caro?" She saw him and her face softened. "You came." "Of course I came. How is she?" Carolyn pulled him into a quiet hallway, away from the other people waiting, away from prying ears. "The twins are alive, 32 weeks, small but strong, a boy and a girl, 3 pounds 12 ounces and 4 pounds 1 ounce. They're in the NICU. And Grace?" Carolyn's expression darkened. "She lost a lot of blood, placental abruption, complete separation. Another 20 minutes and we would have lost all 3 of them." Something twisted in Nathan's chest. A woman he'd never met had almost died. Was maybe still dying. "But she's stable now?" "For now, transfusions, stitches. She'll need weeks to recover, but she's alive." "Where's Derek?" Caroline's eyes flashed pure rage. "Not here." "He never showed?" "Not yet. I had the nurses call him 3 times during surgery, straight to voicemail." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. "It's been over an hour." "I know. His wife almost died." "I know. His children were born." "I know, Nathan." Caroline ran a hand through her hair, made it stand up in stressed-out spikes. "I've been a doctor for 12 years. I've seen deadbeat dads, absent fathers, men who run when things get hard. But this," she called him 4 times, begging, bleeding, terrified. And he chose a party. What kind of man does that? The kind that doesn't deserve her. Nathan pulled out his phone. He had Derek's personal cell, the number Derek had given him during the lawsuit. "Call me if you want to settle." Nathan had never called, until now. He dialed. The phone rang 3 times. Derek's voice came through cheerful and drunk. "Cross, little late for a business call, isn't it? Your wife almost died tonight." Pause, music and laughter in the background. Derek didn't move away from the noise. "What?" "Grace, your pregnant wife. She hemorrhaged. Emergency C-section." Your twins are in the NICU, she's in recovery, and you're at a party. Longer pause. The background noise continued. No urgency, no panic, just confusion. I'm sorry, how did you know about my wife? Because someone had to be here for her, since you couldn't be bothered. Now wait just a minute. She called you 4 times. Did you know that? 4 calls while she was bleeding on your bathroom floor. 4 voicemails begging you to come home. And you said you'd try to make it. Try. Like she was a dentist appointment you might squeeze in if traffic wasn't bad. I was in an important meeting. No, you're at a party. I can hear it. Champagne, music, laughter. Your wife was dying and you were drinking champagne with investors. Derek's voice hardened. You don't know what you're talking about, Cross. You're trying to interfere in my marriage. Room 847, Mercy General, in case you're interested in meeting your children. Nathan hung up. Caroline was watching him. Feel better? No. Nathan sat down hard in one of the plastic chairs. I feel worse, because now I know for sure. He's not just a bad businessman. He's a monster. What are you going to do? Nathan looked at his sister, really looked at her, saw the exhaustion, the anger, the fierce protectiveness. I'm going to sit with her, so she's not alone when she wakes up. Nathan, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Someone has to. And Derek clearly isn't going to. Caroline nodded slowly. Room 847, recovery. She should wake up in about 30 minutes. I'll be there. Thank you for coming, for caring, for being nothing like him. Nathan stood, straightened his bow tie. I'm glad you called me. He walked toward room 847, not knowing he was about to meet the woman who would change his entire life. Grace's eyes fluttered open to fluorescent lights and beeping machines. The ceiling, white tiles, medical equipment, the smell of antiseptic, hospital. Her hands moved automatically to her stomach, flat, empty. Panic hit like a freight train. No, 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 no. Her voice came out raspy. Wrong. My babies. Where are my babies? A nurse appeared. Young, kind eyes, name tag, Rachel Thompson. Mrs. Holloway, you're okay. You're in recovery. Your babies are fine. They're in the NICU, a boy and a girl, small but strong. Grace started crying. Relief and terror and overwhelming love all mixed together. Can I see them? Soon. You need to stabilize first. You lost a lot of blood. Dr. Cross did an amazing job. You're going to be okay. How long was I out? About an hour. The surgery went well. Grace's next question came automatically. Muscle memory. 4 years of marriage programmed into her nervous system. Where's Derek? Rachel's expression shifted. Subtle, but Grace saw it. The nurse knew. Somehow she knew. I'll check on that for you, honey. She left. Grace lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them. 37 tiles across, 23 tiles down, 851 tiles total, 37 minutes since she'd woken up. Still no Derek. Her mind, no longer clouded by morphine, began the terrible work of understanding. My body just did the most terrifying thing it will ever do. I went into surgery not knowing if I'd wake up, if my babies would survive, if this was the last day of my life, and he's not here. He's still not here. What does that mean? No, I know what it means. I've known for months. It means I'm alone. I've been alone. I was alone in our marriage long before I was alone in that ambulance. The late nights. Of course. The late nights when he had come home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. She told herself it was from a client meeting. A colleague's hug. Something innocent. It wasn't innocent. The way he flinched when she touched him. Like her hands were foreign, unwelcome. The way he looked at his phone and smiled. Smiles she hadn't seen directed at her in years. There was someone else. Of course there was someone else. Who stayed with the boring pregnant wife when there was someone exciting waiting? Someone who didn't snore. Whose body wasn't swollen and stretched. Who didn't need anything from him except what he was already giving. His attention, his time, his affection, the things he used to give Grace, the things she'd begged for, the things he'd given someone else instead. A soft knock on the door. Grace's heart jumped. Finally. Derek? But it wasn't Derek. A man stood in the doorway, tall, dark hair, around 40, wearing a tuxedo with the bow tie loosened. He looked uncomfortable, out of place, but his eyes were kind. "Hi, I'm Nathan. Nathan Cross. Dr. Cross is my sister. Caroline, your surgeon." Grace stared at him, this complete stranger in her hospital room. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know this is strange. Stranger showing up uninvited. But Caroline called me, said you were alone, and I thought maybe you shouldn't be, not tonight." Grace's eyes filled with tears. She tried to stop them. Couldn't. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Nathan stepped inside, hesitant. "Can I sit?" Grace nodded. He sat in the chair beside her bed, set down 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee on the side table. "My mother died in a hospital room 20 years ago, alone. My father was at a business conference in Singapore. Caroline and I were away at school. The nurse found her in the morning. She'd been gone for hours. She died alone because we were all somewhere else, doing important things, living our lives." Grace's breath caught. "I can't change that. Can't go back and be there when she needed me. But when Caroline called tonight and said you were here alone after almost dying, I couldn't not come. Does that make sense? You didn't have to do this. I know, but I wanted to." Nathan picked up 1 coffee cup, offered it. "It's terrible coffee, hospital vending machine, but it's warm." Grace took it. Her hands shook. They sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Then Grace asked the question she already knew the answer to. "Where's my husband?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "I called him about 30 minutes ago, told him you were here, that the babies were born. He said he'd try to make it." "Try? Try?" Grace laughed. That terrible broken sound. "Of course, he'll try. He's very good at trying. He just never quite makes it. Does he?" "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's not your fault. It's mine. For staying, for believing him every time he said things would change, for making excuses, for convincing myself that busy meant he still cared. It's not your fault. Isn't it? I saw the signs, the late nights, the distance, the way he pulled away. I knew something was wrong, but I told myself I was being paranoid, dramatic, just like he always said. You're not crazy. How do you know? Because I heard him on the phone, when the paramedics called, when I called. Both times he chose something else. That's not you being dramatic. That's him being absent." Grace started crying, not delicate tears, ugly gasping sobs, the kind that came from somewhere deep, the kind she'd been holding in for months, maybe years. Nathan didn't offer empty platitudes. Didn't say, "I'm sure he's on his way," or "he loves you, he's just bad at showing it." He just scooted his chair closer, sat there, present. "I know this hurts. I'm sorry." 3 simple words, "I'm sorry." The first honest acknowledgement she'd heard all night. The first validation that what happened to her was wrong, that she had a right to be hurt. Grace cried harder. Nathan sat with her, patient, silent, just there. 10 minutes passed, 15, 20. Then the door banged open. Derek Holloway finally arrived. Derek burst through the door like a hurricane, still in his designer suit. Tom Ford, charcoal gray, hair perfect, every strand in place, tie loosened just enough to look like he'd been concerned, rushed, worried. But Grace knew better. He smelled like champagne and expensive cologne. His cheeks were flushed, from alcohol, not from running through hospital corridors, desperate to reach his dying wife. His eyes scanned the room, landed on Grace, then on Nathan. His expression changed, recognition, then fury. "What the hell are you doing in my wife's room?" Nathan stood slowly, deliberately, all 6 feet 2 inches of him unfolding from the chair. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. "I was here." 3 words, simple, devastating. Derek's face flushed red. "Get out, now." "Derek," Grace's voice was small, trying. Derek didn't look at her, eyes locked on Nathan. "Not you, him. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Cross, but my wife just had surgery, And I won't have you manipulating her while she's vulnerable. I know she had surgery. Nathan's voice stayed calm. Too calm. I was here. He said it again. Slower. Each word a knife. You son of a... Derek lunged forward. Nathan didn't move. Didn't flinch. Grace's voice cut through. Stop! Both men froze. Derek, he's right. He was here. You weren't. Derek finally looked at his wife. Really looked at her for the first time since walking in. She was pale. Hive in her arm. Hospital gown. Hair matted with sweat. Exhausted. Beautiful. Vulnerable. His. Except she wasn't looking at him the way she used to. No hope in her eyes. No relief that he'd finally arrived. No forgiveness ready and waiting. Just nothing. Grace, you're emotional. You just had major surgery. The anesthesia, the medications, you're not thinking clear. I'm thinking very clearly. No, you're not. You don't understand what you're saying. This man is my business rival. He hates me. He's probably been filling your head with lies. I called you 4 times. Her voice was steady now, stronger. Derek blinked, shifted gears. I was in an investor meeting. You know how important the Singapore deal is. This could make or break the company. I was securing our future. I was bleeding. I thought I was losing our babies. You're always thinking something's wrong. Derek's voice took on that tone. The patient but annoyed one. The one that made Grace feel crazy. Last month it was Braxton Hicks. The month before you thought you had preeclampsia. The doctor said you were fine. You're paranoid, Grace. It's the pregnancy hormones making you... I almost died tonight. Don't be dramatic. I almost died. Silence. The machines beeped. Steady. Keeping time. Keeping her alive. And you weren't here. You chose investors over me. Over our children. That's not fair. You're twisting this. I was working, providing for our family. When was the last time you chose me, Derek? Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's not a fair question. When was the last time you touched me without me initiating? When was the last time you asked about my day, about how I'm feeling, about the babies? When was the last time you looked at me the way you look at your phone when it buzzes? Grace, I work 14-hour days to give us this life. The penthouse, your car, the private schools our kids will go to. Everything you have is because I work hard. I don't care about the penthouse. Derek stopped, blinked. What? I don't care about the penthouse, or the car, or the private schools. I care about you, about us. But there is no us anymore, is there? There's you and your work and your phone and whatever else you're doing when you're not home. And then there's me, waiting, always waiting. Grace's internal voice spoke clearly now. No more second guessing, no more doubt. For 3 years I've been apologizing. Apologizing for needing him, for wanting him home, for asking questions, for feeling lonely, for being pregnant and uncomfortable and emotional. I apologize for existing in a way that inconvenienced him. I'm done apologizing. I didn't do this. He did. He chose this. Every late night, every missed call, every time he looked at me like I was a burden instead of his wife. He chose this, and I'm choosing me. Out loud, she said, leave. Derek stared at her. What? Leave. I don't want you here. Grace, you're not thinking clearly. The anesthesia, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Leave. She asked you to leave. Nathan's voice. Steel underneath silk. Derek whirled on him. This is your fault. You poisoned her against me. Came in here with your bleeding heart story and turned her against her own husband. Your wife almost died alone. Nathan's voice rose for the first time. Controlled fury finally unleashed. While you were drinking champagne and schmoozing investors and doing whatever the hell you were doing at your party, your wife hemorrhaged on your bathroom floor. She called you 4 times. 4. Begging, bleeding, terrified, and you said you'd try to make it. Like she was a dentist appointment you might squeeze in if traffic wasn't bad. You don't understand the pressures. I understand that I hate you. I've hated you for years. You tried to steal my research. You tried to destroy my company. You're a liar and a manipulator and everything wrong with this industry. But this, Nathan stepped closer. This makes you something worse than a bad businessman. This makes you a coward who abandoned his wife when she needed him most. Derek's hands clenched. Get out before I call security. Call them, please. I'd love to explain to hospital security why Grace's husband showed up 3 hours late while a stranger sat with her because she had nobody else. Derek's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it. Instinct. Automatic. Couldn't help himself. Grace saw his face change, soften, just for a second. She recognized that look. She'd seen it before. On his face when he read texts late at night, when he took calls in the other room, when he smiled at his screen like it was telling him secrets. That look wasn't for her. It had never been for her. Who is she? Derek froze, phone still in his hand. What? I said, who is she, the woman you're texting? The woman who makes you smile like that. The woman you'd rather be with right now. Who is she? Derek's face drained of color, and Grace knew. She'd always known, but now she had proof. Derek stood frozen, phone in hand, face pale as death. Grace, it's not what you think. Don't. Her voice was steel now, cold, hard, final. Don't you dare lie to me right now, not here, not after everything. Tell me the truth. For once in your life, just tell me the truth. Silence. The machines beeped, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beeps, each one marking time, measuring the death of a marriage. How long? Derek looked at the floor. Grace, how long? 6 months. The room tilted. 6 months. Grace did the math. She was 7 months pregnant. You started cheating on me while I was pregnant. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Please, explain it to me. Make it make sense. Make me understand how you started sleeping with someone else while I was carrying your children. Nathan took a step back, giving them space. But his presence was still there, solid, an anchor. Derek ran a hand through his perfect hair, messing it up for the first time all night. You changed. When you got pregnant, everything became about the baby, then babies. Everything was doctor, appointments, and nursery colors, and baby names. I felt pushed out, like I didn't matter anymore. Grace laughed, a horrible sound, bitter, broken. So you pushed me out of your life instead. I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did. Things got complicated and I didn't know how to stop it. Who is she? Derek hesitated. Derek, tell me who she is. Vanessa. The name hit like a punch to the gut. Vanessa? Nathan's voice, sharp, angry. Vanessa Reed, your executive assistant? Derek's silence confirmed it. Grace's mind spun. Vanessa Reed, 28 years old. Beautiful. Stanford MBA. Always perfectly dressed. Always at Derek's side. Grace had met her multiple times. At company parties, holiday events, Derek's office. She'd smiled at her, made small talk, asked about her family, complimented her outfits. Last Christmas, Grace had sent her homemade cookies, her grandmother's recipe, chocolate chip with sea salt. Vanessa had sent a thank you card. You're so sweet. Derek is lucky to have you. Derek is lucky to have you. The Hawaii trip, Grace's voice was eerily calm. Last March, the pharmaceutical convention. Derek's face confirmed it before he spoke. She was there, wasn't she? Grace? I packed your bag for that trip. Put in the sunscreen you like. The blue swim trunks. I tucked a note in your suitcase. Told you I loved you. That I missed you already. Did you read it, or did she find it first? Derek said nothing. Answer me. I read it. And then what? You went to her room? Grace, please don't do this. Answer me. Yes, okay? Yes, I went to her room. Grace closed her eyes, breathed, opened them. The night I told you we were having twins. May 15th. Our 4-year anniversary. I made your favorite dinner, wore the dress you bought me in Paris, had the ultrasound photos in a frame, 2 heartbeats, twins. I was so excited to tell you. Derek's face crumbled. You came home 3 hours late, said there was traffic on the bridge. Grace, you were with her on our anniversary. On the day I found out we were having twins, you were with her. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. It was a mistake. One time, but then it kept happening and I didn't know how to stop. You stopped by stopping. You stopped by not going to her, by not texting her, by not choosing her over your pregnant wife every single day for 6 months. Do you love her? Derek didn't answer. Derek, do you love her? I don't know. Do you love me? Of course. Don't. Grace's voice broke. Don't say it if you don't mean it. Do you still love me? Me, the woman you married, the mother of your children. Do you love me? Derek looked at her, really looked at her, and said nothing. His silence was the answer. Get out. Grace, we can fix this. Marriage counseling, I'll end it with Vanessa. I'll cut all contact. We have children together now. We have to try. She asked you to leave. Nathan's voice was dangerous now. Multiple times. So leave. Before I personally escort you out. Stay out of this, Cross. This is between me and my wife. Your wife who you cheated on. Your wife who you abandoned. Your wife who almost died tonight because you were too busy screwing your assistant to answer your phone. Derek lunged at Nathan. Nathan sidestepped easily. Practiced. Like he'd expected, I bit it. Derek stumbled, caught himself on the wall. I could have you arrested for assault, Nathan said calmly. Security cameras everywhere in hospitals. Very well documented. Derek straightened his jacket, tried to regain his composure. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Grace's voice was quiet, final. You ended it 6 months ago when you chose her. You ended it today when you ignored my calls. You ended it when you showed up here 3 hours late smelling like champagne. It's over, Derek. Accept it. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner. Derek looked between Grace and Nathan one last time, calculating, weighing his options. He knew when he was beaten. My lawyers will be in touch. He left. The door closed behind him. The room fell silent except for the machines, beeping steadily, keeping Grace alive. Grace stared at the door for a long moment. Then she started shaking. Not crying, shaking, her whole body, like all the adrenaline was finally leaving, all the fear, all the strength it took to say those things. Gone. She was empty. Nathan sat back down, said nothing, just sat. Grace shook for 5 full minutes. Finally it stopped. She looked at Nathan, this stranger who'd seen her at her absolute worst. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You stayed. You didn't have to, but you stayed. I knew. Grace's voice was quiet. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. The late nights, the way he pulled away, the perfume on his shirts. But I told myself I was imagining things, being paranoid, that the pregnancy hormones were making me crazy. You're not crazy. I should have confronted him sooner, months ago instead of... No, Nathan's voice was firm. Don't do that. Don't do what? Don't make his choices your fault. He cheated, he lied, he gaslit you, made you doubt yourself. That's on him, not you. But I saw the signs, and he lied about them, made you feel guilty for even asking. Right? Grace nodded, tears sliding down her face. That's what narcissistic abuse looks like. They make you doubt your own reality, make you think you're the problem, too needy, too emotional, too suspicious. But you weren't any of those things. You were right. Your instincts were right. He was just a good liar. Grace looked out the window. Dawn was breaking, pink and orange spreading across the city skyline. She'd been awake for 24 hours, given birth to twins, nearly died, discovered her husband's affair, ended her marriage, and the sun rose anyway. There was something beautiful about that, something hopeful. The world didn't stop for heartbreak. It kept going, which meant she could keep going too. Mrs. Holloway? Nurse Rachel appeared in the doorway. Are you feeling strong enough to meet your babies? Everything else fell away. The heartbreak, the anger, the exhaustion. None of it mattered. Yes, please, yes. They wheeled Grace to the NICU in a wheelchair. Nathan walked beside her. She'd asked him to come, needed someone there. And Derek clearly wasn't going to show. The NICU was quiet. Dim lights. Warm. The sound of tiny heartbeat monitors beeping softly. Nurses moved on quiet feet. Parents sat beside incubators, hoping and praying. Rachel stopped at 2 incubators side by side. Baby girl Holloway, 3 pounds, 12 ounces. Baby boy Holloway, 4 pounds, 1 ounce. 2 tiny humans, impossibly small, impossibly perfect. Wires and tubes. Too many wires and too many tubes, but breathing, moving. Emma had dark hair, lots of it, Derek's hair. Lucas was bald, pink. His nose was Grace's nose. They were perfect. Grace started crying. Different tears now, joy mixed with grief, mixed with overwhelming love, mixed with terror. They're so small. They're fighters, Rachel said gently. Strong vitals, good oxygen levels. Dr. Cross says they're doing remarkably well for 32 weeks. Can I touch them? Absolutely. Rachel opened the incubator porthole. Grace reached in with one finger, touched Emma's hand. Emma's tiny fingers curled around Grace's finger. Grip tight, strong. That grip, that tiny, perfect grip. Grace's whole world shifted. She touched Lucas next, his perfect, tiny hand. Her internal voice spoke clearly. I will not let you grow up watching your mother accept crumbs. I will not teach you that love looks like loneliness. I will show you what strength looks like, what self-respect looks like, even if it means burning my whole life down and starting over, even if it means being a single mother, even if it's hard, even if I'm terrified. I will do this for you and for me. Out loud, she whispered, Hi, babies. I'm your mom, and I love you. I love you so much, and I promise I'll give you the life you deserve, no matter what. One of the babies kicked. Emma, strong little fighter. Nathan stood back watching, his eyes suspiciously bright. Grace looked up at him. Thank you for being here. Nowhere else I'd rather be. 4 days passed. Grace recovered in the hospital. The twins stayed in NICU. Derek visited once. Stayed 10 minutes. Took photos for social media. Left. Nathan visited every day. Brought food, coffee. Books Grace didn't have energy to read. Just showed up. On the 4th day, Dr. Caroline Cross came in with discharge papers. You're healing well. Blood count is back up. No infection. You can go home today. When can the twins come home? Probably 2 weeks. They're gaining weight, getting stronger every day. Can I stay here with them? Carolyn hesitated. There's a family room, but it's shared, not private. Grace, you need real rest. In a real bed. Grace went quiet. Home, the penthouse, where Derek was, where everything reminded her of the lie she'd been living. She hadn't talked to Derek since that first night. He'd called, texted, sent flowers. She'd ignored everything. Where are you going to go? Carolyn asked gently. A knock on the door. Nathan entered, carrying lunch from the good sandwich place downtown. He stopped, saw Grace's face. What's wrong? She's being discharged, Carolyn explained, but she doesn't want to go back to the penthouse. Don't, Nathan said immediately. What? Don't go back there, not yet. I don't have anywhere else. Yes, you do. Nathan set down the lunch. I have a guest house on my property in Marin County, 3 bedrooms, fully furnished. It's been empty for 6 months. You can stay there. Nathan, I can't. Why not? Because you barely know me. You don't owe me anything. And people will talk. Let them talk. You need somewhere safe to recover, somewhere Derek can't show up whenever he wants. The guest house is completely separate from my main house, 200 yards away. Total privacy. This is too much. I have an empty guest house. You need somewhere to live. It's just logistics. Caroline jumped in. Grace, take the offer. You need calm, stress-free. Marin is perfect for recovery. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, Nathan said firmly. Let me help, please. Grace looked at him, really looked. Why are you doing this? Nathan sat down, took a breath. I told you about my mother, how she died alone. What I didn't tell you is that my father had affairs, multiple affairs, my whole childhood. My mother knew. We all knew, but he'd deny it. Make her feel crazy for asking. Just like Derek does to you. Grace's breath caught. She spent her whole marriage making excuses for him and telling herself she was being paranoid, that successful men work hard and she should be grateful. She died still making excuses. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me what not to become, and it taught me to recognize narcissistic abuse when I see it. What Derek is doing to you, what he's been doing, it's textbook. The gaslighting, the blame shifting, the making you doubt your own reality. You're not crazy, Grace. You're being abused. The word hung in the air. Abused. Grace had never thought of it that way. Derek never hit her, never screamed. He was just busy, distracted, unavailable. But emotional abuse was still abuse, and she'd been living in it for years. Okay, she whispered. Yes, thank you. I'll stay in the guest house, just until I figure out what's next. Stay as long as you need. As Nathan helped Grace gather her things, Nurse Rachel appeared again. Mrs. Holloway, someone's here to see you. Who? Your husband and his lawyer. Grace's stomach dropped. They went down to the lobby. Derek stood there in a fresh suit, navy blue. Next to him was a man in his 60s. Silver hair, expensive briefcase, shark eyes, his lawyer. Grace, Derek said, we need to talk about custody. Derek's lawyer stepped forward, name tag on his briefcase. Richard Brennan, Esquire. Mrs. Holloway, I'm Richard Brennan, Mr. Holloway's legal counsel. We need to discuss custody arrangements. Whoa, Grace gripped the wheelchair armrest. The babies are in NICU. We understand. We're discussing once they're released. Mr. Holloway is prepared to petition for joint custody. 50-50 split. 50-50? Grace's voice was faint. Standard in Washington state for parents of equal standing. Nathan stepped forward. Equal standing? He wasn't even here when they were born. Brennan didn't blink. Mr. Cross, I don't believe your family. This is a private matter. I'm her friend, and I'm staying. We can discuss this with Mrs. Holloway's attorney present. Does she have counsel? Grace shook her head. Then I suggest you retain someone quickly. Mr. Holloway is also concerned about your living situation. Moving in with a man you have known less than a week raises questions about judgment and stability. Something inside Grace snapped. 4 days ago, she would have shrunk, apologized, explained. Not anymore. You want to talk about judgment? Her voice was steel. Let's talk about how Derek ignored 4 emergency calls while I hemorrhaged. How he showed up 3 hours after our children were born. How he spent 6 months cheating on me with his assistant while I carried his twins. Brennan's expression didn't change. Mrs. Holloway, marital indiscretions are separate from parental fitness. Are they? Because I'd argue that a man who can't prioritize his wife's medical emergency might struggle to prioritize his children's needs. If you're going to make accusations, they're facts, documented by hospital phone records, nurse testimony, paramedic reports, and a dozen voicemails still on my phone. Would you like to hear them? Me begging my husband to come home while I bled on our bathroom floor. Derek spoke for the first time. Grace, you're being unreasonable. No, I'm being a mother, and I'm done letting you make me feel crazy for expecting basic human decency. Nathan pulled out his phone. Mr. Brennan, I suggest your client backs off. Are you threatening us? I'm making a promise. If Derek pushes this custody battle, I will personally fund Grace's legal team. The best divorce attorneys in Seattle. The kind that cost $2,000 an hour. Mr. Cross, your wealth doesn't intimidate. It should. Because if we go to court, every reporter in this city will know that pharmaceutical CEO Derek Holloway abandoned his pregnant wife during a medical emergency, that he ignored emergency calls to drink champagne with investors, that he cheated on his wife while she carried his children, that his mistress is his 28-year-old employee. Derek's face paled. How do you think your board will react to that headline? Your investors? The Singapore deal is still pending, right? Think they want to partner with a man whose personal life is a public disaster? Brennan adjusted his briefcase. Public smear campaigns can go both ways. Can they? I have documentation. Hospital records, phone logs, witness testimony from paramedics, nurses, and doctors. What do you have? Speculation about where Grace is living? Nathan continued. Here's what's going to happen. Grace will hire an attorney, a good one. You'll negotiate a fair custody arrangement. Grace gets primary custody. Derek gets supervised visitation until the twins are old enough for extended time away from their mother. Supervised visitation is for unfit parents. Exactly. Derek lunged forward. I am not an unfit parent. You weren't there when they were born. You visited them twice in 4 days. You're here with a lawyer instead of upstairs meeting more children. What exactly makes you fit? Derek looked between Grace and Nathan, his face red, hands clenched. He was a businessman. He calculated odds, weighed options. He knew when he was beaten. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Grace said quietly. You ended it 6 months ago when you chose her. You ended it today when you showed up with a lawyer instead of flowers. It's over, Derek. Accept it. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner. Derek and Brennan left. Grace sat in the wheelchair shaking, but differently this time. Not fear, adrenaline, power. Did I really just do that? You did, Nathan said, and you were incredible. Carolyn appeared from around the corner. I was listening. Grace Holloway, you're my new hero. Grace laughed, then cried, then laughed again. I have no idea what I'm doing. None of us do, Carolyn said, but you're doing it anyway. That's what matters. They drove to Marin County, Nathan's Tesla, smooth, quiet. Grace watched Seattle disappear in the rearview mirror. I've never stood up to him like that. How does it feel? Terrifying and good. Really, really good. The property was beautiful, modern architecture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay, trees everywhere. The air smelled clean. The guest house sat separate from the main house. Private driveway, complete privacy. Inside was peaceful. Open concept, white walls, wood floors, comfortable furniture. 3 bedrooms, 1 master, 2 smaller rooms. 1 room had been converted to a nursery. 2 cribs, changing table, rocking chair, soft gray curtains. Nathan, when did you do this? Carolyn helped. She knows what babies need. On the kitchen counter sat the welcome basket. Groceries, coffee, prenatal vitamins, a soft blanket, a note in feminine handwriting. Welcome home. You're going to be an amazing mother. Call anytime, day or night. Carolyn Shaw. P.S. Nathan is speed dial 2. I'm speed dial 1. Use us. Grace picked up the note, read it again, started crying. Why are you both being so nice to me? Nathan set down her bag. Because you deserve nice. You deserve people who show up, who follow through, who don't make you beg for basic human decency. 2 weeks later, the twins came home. Emma and Lucas, 5 pounds each, healthy, strong, perfect. Grace brought them to the guest house, her temporary home that was starting to feel permanent. She stood in the nursery holding both babies, one in each arm. This was what she'd been fighting for. Not a marriage to a man who didn't want to be there. But this, her babies, herself, a chance to build something real. Nathan helped, not intrusively, just there. He brought groceries, held Emma while Grace fed Lucas, did midnight diaper runs without being asked. He treated Grace like she was capable, strong, not broken, not someone who needed saving, just someone who needed support. 3 a.m. one night, Grace was feeding Lucas. Nathan knocked softly. Can't sleep? Sleep is a myth, Grace said. Smiled, tired but real. Want company? Always. Nathan sat in the second rocking chair, the one meant for Derek that Derek would never use. They sat in comfortable silence. Lucas grunted softly. Emma sighed in her crib. Why are you doing all this? Grace asked. I told you, my mother. There's more to it than that. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. When Caroline called me that night, I was at a gala, giving speeches about showing up for children in need. Then she said a woman was dying alone because her husband was too busy, and I realized I was becoming my father. Too busy for what matters. Building empires instead of relationships. You're nothing like your father, aren't I? I work 80-hour weeks, no relationship lasting more than 3 months in 5 years. I throw money at problems instead of actually showing up. Until you. Until me? Helping you isn't just about you. It's about being the person I needed back then, the person my mother needed, and figuring out who I want to be. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just me. Grace reached over, took his hand. Thank you for seeing me, for being here, for not making me feel weak. You're the strongest person I've met, Grace. 6 months passed. The King County Courthouse stood gray and imposing against the November sky. Grace stood on the steps, hands shaking slightly, about to walk into her final divorce hearing. 6 months since that terrible night. 6 months of healing, growing, becoming someone new. Jennifer Morrison, her divorce attorney, touched her arm. You ready? Grace nodded. She was ready. Inside, Derek sat with Vanessa. They'd come together, holding hands. They looked miserable. Turned out mistresses didn't enjoy the reality of being wives, the mundane, the ordinary, the work of actual relationship. Vanessa looked tired, resentful, like she'd gotten a raw deal. Derek looked older, grayer, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Grace felt nothing looking at them, not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity, just relief that she wasn't in Vanessa's shoes. Jennifer presented the settlement. Full physical custody of minor children, Emma Grace Holloway and Lucas James Holloway to Grace Holloway. Mr. Holloway receives supervised visitation every other Saturday for 4 hours. Supervision to be lifted once children reach age 3, pending regular visits and demonstrated consistent engagement. Child support, $5,000 monthly per child, $10,000 total. Marital assets, the penthouse has been sold. Proceeds split 60-40 in Mrs. Holloway's favor due to Mr. Holloway's marital misconduct and abandonment during medical emergency. Derek's lawyer tried to object. Your Honor, the 60-40 split is excessive. Judge Patricia Henderson, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, cut him off. Mr. Brennan, your client committed adultery during his wife's high-risk pregnancy and failed to respond to multiple emergency calls, resulting in his wife nearly dying alone. The 60-40 split is generous. I suggest you accept it before I adjust it to 70-30. The judge continued. Mr. Holloway, I strongly suggest you use your supervised visitation time to build a relationship with your children. They deserve a father who shows up. Be that father. The gavel came down. Divorce granted. Custody awarded to Mrs. Holloway as outlined. Court adjourned. It was over. Grace walked out of the courthouse into cold November air. Nathan was waiting by his car. He'd come to the hearing, sat in the back. Moral support. How do you feel? Light. I feel light. Like I've been carrying something heavy for years and finally put it down. Good. That's good. They stood there on the courthouse steps, Grace in her navy dress, Nathan in his suit. What's next? Nathan asked. Grace smiled. I'm going back to school. Child psychology. Online program. I want to help other women. Women like me. Help them recognize narcissistic abuse before they almost die on a bathroom floor. That's amazing, Grace. And I'm going to date myself for a while, figure out who I am without someone telling me who I should be. Smart. Grace paused, looked at Nathan directly. But after that, after I figure out who I am, maybe we could get coffee, actual coffee, not hospital vending machine coffee. Nathan's face broke into a smile. I'd like that. Not a date, not yet. Not yet, Nathan agreed, but maybe someday. Maybe someday. Grace turned to leave, then stopped, turned back. Nathan, I need to say something, and I need to say it now before I lose my nerve. Nathan's expression became serious. Okay. 6 months ago, you were there, every day, every 3 a.m. feeding, every panic attack, every moment. You didn't have to be. You're not obligated, but you were there. Grace, let me finish. Emma and Lucas don't know Derek. They were 3 months old when he stopped visiting. They don't remember him, but they know you. Lucas smiles when he hears your voice. Emma sleeps best on your shoulder. When they cry, they want you. Nathan's eyes were bright. You change diapers at 3 a.m. You sing them to sleep. You read to them every night. You're there. And I want you to know that if you want, if you're ready, I'd like you to become their father, officially, legally, not just in their hearts, but on paper. Emma and Lucas Cross, or Cross Holloway, whatever you want. Silence. Nathan stood perfectly still, looking at Grace, eyes red. You're asking me if I want to adopt them? I'm asking if you want to be their dad, officially, legally, not just Uncle Nathan, but dad, daddy, their father. Nathan took a step forward, then another. He was close now. Grace Holloway, these last 6 months have been the best 6 months of my 40 years. Nathan, every morning waking up knowing I'd see you, see Emma, see Lucas, that's been a gift I didn't think I deserved. But I'm grateful every single day. I love them. Emma and Lucas. I love how Lucas grabs my finger, how Emma falls asleep on my shoulder. I love their 3 a.m. cries. I love the smell of their heads. I love everything. Grace's breath caught. And I love you. I've loved you since that night in the hospital when you were stronger than anyone I'd ever met. I love you more every day. How you fight, how you love your children, how you rebuilt your life, how you never gave up. So yes, yes, 1,000 times yes, I want to be their father. I want to sign the papers. I want to change their names. I want every parent-teacher conference, every vaccine appointment, every birthday, every Christmas, all of it. Grace was crying, happy tears. But Grace, I want one more thing. What? Nathan pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Grace's hands flew to her mouth. This isn't how I wanted to do this. I wanted romantic, beach, sunset, candles. But Grace, I've waited 6 months to tell you this, and I can't wait another minute. Nathan dropped to one knee, right there, on the courthouse steps. Grace Holloway, you make me want to a better man, a better father, a better partner. I can't promise perfect. I can't promise I won't make mistakes, but I promise I'll always be there. I'll always answer the phone. I'll always put you and the children first. Always. Grace, will you marry me? Grace looked at Nathan, the man who'd saved her, the man who'd stayed, the man who'd loved her children as his own. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Nathan stood, slipped the ring on her finger, kissed her, right there on the courthouse steps. People walking by stopped, smiled. A few applauded. Grace laughed through her tears. I can't believe this is happening. Believe it. It's real. All of it. 18 months later, Saturday morning in Sausalito, Grace and Nathan's home. Not the guest house anymore. Their home. Together. The kitchen was bright, sunny, warm, filled with the chaos of morning. Emma and Lucas, now 2 years old, sat in their high chairs, matching pajamas. Pancakes everywhere. Sticky fingers. Pure joy. Nathan stood at the stove, making more pancakes, wearing an apron that said, World's okayest dad. Grace made coffee, her 7-month pregnant belly bumping the counter. Baby number 3 on the way. Daddy, more juice. Emma held up her cup. Nathan grinned. Say please, Emmy bug. Please. That's my girl. He poured juice, kissed her head. Lucas banged his spoon. Dada, dada, up. After breakfast, buddy, eat your pancakes. Grace watched them, her heart so full it might burst. This was family, not perfect, messy, chaotic, beautiful. Nathan caught her staring. What? Nothing, just happy. Me too. He walked over, put his hand on her belly. How's baby Cross doing? Active, very active. I think this one's a soccer player. Just like Lucas. Well, Emma suddenly announced, Mama, Daddy, Wook! She held up a drawing, crayon, stick figures. Mama, Daddy, Emmy, Luke, and a tiny baby. That's beautiful, sweetheart. That's our family. That's right, baby. That's our family. Nathan's voice went quiet. Grace? Yeah? Thank you. For what? For letting me be their dad. For letting me be your husband. For this. All of it. Grace took his hand. Thank you for showing up. That first night, and every night since. I'll always show up, always. Lucas shouted, Dada, pancake, now! Nathan laughed. Duty calls. The doorbell rang. Grace opened it. A delivery man. Delivery for Nathan Cross? That's us. He handed her an envelope. Official looking. Grace opened it, read. Tears sprang to her eyes. Nathan! Nathan, come here! Nathan appeared, Lucas on his hip, pancake batter on his shirt. What's wrong? Grace held up the paper, shaking, happy shaking. It's official. The adoption went through. You're their legal father, Emma and Lucas Cross. It's done. Nathan set Lucas down carefully, took the paper. Certificate of adoption. Emma Grace Cross, Lucas James Cross, legal father Nathan William Cross. Date November 1st, 2027. Nathan's eyes filled with tears. I'm their dad. You've always been their dad. Now it's official. Emma toddled over. Daddy, cry. Nathan scooped her up. Then Lucas, both kids in his arms. Happy tears, Emmy Bug. These are happy tears. Happy tears, Emma repeated, delighted. Lucas patted Nathan's face. Dada, my Dada. That's right, buddy. I'm your Dada. Forever. Grace put her hand on Nathan's shoulder. They stood there, together, family. The camera would pull back slowly if this were a movie. Kitchen full of morning light, pancakes on the stove, crayon drawings on the fridge, adoption certificate on the counter. A family. Imperfect, real, beautiful. On the wall hung a professional photo. Grace, Nathan, Emma, and Lucas. Everyone smiling. Below it, a small plaque. Family isn't always blood. It's the people who show up, who stay, who love you at your worst and celebrate you at your best. This is our family, built on love, built on choice, built to last. Grace's internal voice spoke one last time. A year and a half ago, I almost died alone. Today, I'm surrounded by more love than I ever dreamed possible. Derek gave me Emma and Lucas. I'll always be grateful for that. But Nathan gave them a father, and he gave me a partner, a real partner. Not someone who shows up when convenient, but someone who shows up, period. This is my happily ever after, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And it's mine, ours. Emma tugged on Grace's shirt. Mama, I hungry, Grace laughed. More pancakes coming right up. Nathan served pancakes. Emma showed her drawing to everyone again. Lucas demanded more juice, normal chaos. Beautiful chaos. This was what Grace had fought for. Not financial independence from a millionaire ex-husband, though that helped. Not the divorce settlement that gave her freedom, though that mattered. Not even escaping narcissistic abuse, though that saved her life. No, she'd fought for this, for mornings full of laughter, for children who knew they were loved, for a partner who showed up, for a family built on choice and commitment and real love. Not the love that looks good on paper, the love that looks good in the messy, beautiful, imperfect reality of everyday life. Grace had almost died alone on a bathroom floor, but she hadn't died. She'd survived. And in surviving, she'd found something she'd lost somewhere along the way. Herself. Derek had taken 4 years of her life, but she wasn't giving him one more second. This was her beginning. Hers and her children's. Hers and Nathan's. And it was perfect, not because everything was easy, not because there were no challenges, not because it looked like a fairy tale, but because it was real. It was chosen. It was earned. Every day, Grace woke up and chose this life, chose these people, chose herself. And every day, Nathan made the same choice, to show up, to stay, to love, not with words, but with actions. The dirty diapers at 3 a.m., the midnight pharmacy runs, the holding Emma during vaccines, the reading Lucas stories before bed, the making pancakes on Saturday mornings, the showing up, always showing up. That was love, not the grand gestures, not the expensive gifts, not the promises made and broken, but the daily choice to be there, to stay, to love. Grace had learned the hard way that you can't shrink yourself into being loved. You can't apologize your way into mattering. You can't make someone choose you, but you can choose yourself. And when you do, the right people show up. The people who were always meant to find you. The people who see you and stay. Grace had found her people, and she was never letting them go. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows. Lucas laughed at something Nathan said. Emma showed her drawing to Grace for the 10th time. Grace's hand rested on her pregnant belly. Baby number 3, a girl. They were naming her Caroline, after the doctor who'd saved Grace's life and brought Nathan into it. Everything had come full circle, from death to life, from loneliness to family, from crumbs to abundance, from narcissistic abuse to healthy love, from losing herself to finding herself. This was Grace's story, not a victim's story, a survivor's story, a warrior's story, a woman who almost died and decided to live instead. Really live, not just exist, not just survive, but thrive. And she was thriving, with her children, with her husband, with her life, a life she'd built from the ashes of the old one, a life that was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful, a life that was hers. And no one, not Derek, not anyone, could ever take that away from her. Grace Holloway had saved herself, and in doing so, she'd built a family, a real family, the kind that shows up, the kind that stays, the kind that loves without conditions. And that made all the difference.